Hello everyone, this is TheNelston. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to build your base in Rebirth of the Night. Instead of focusing on rigid models, I will be discussing the specific elements that go into making a strong base so that you can be creative with your own designs. We will be covering environments, floor plans, walls, traps, invasions, and then taking a look at some examples of bases made by experienced Rebirth players. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight into the video. Picking out a location to settle down is perhaps the most critical part of this guide. First, you want to make sure that you are cognizant of all the environmental factors at play in each specific biome. Some factors you will want to think about are mob spawns, terrain hazards, and seasons. For example, high altitude locations like mountains will spawn loads of dangerous and annoying harpies. Deserts will have falling sand and cacti, which can make construction a little bit more difficult. And cold biomes like tundras will be perpetually locked in the winter season, meaning that you cannot grow any crops without botanic glass. Next, you want to consider the natural features that surround your potential base. There are many different types of features, but the two I would consider to be the most important are topography or elevation and cover. If your base is in a wide valley, it is going to be much more difficult to defend, as mobs can spawn on the hills and drop down to your base, whereas if it's in a large flat area or on a hill, mobs will either have to walk towards or up to your base, which tends to make defending your location a little bit easier. You also want to look at what might provide shade for mobs to spawn in or hide away from the sun under. As a general rule of thumb, you want to build your base in an area with as little shade cover as possible. So that means getting rid of trees, knocking down overhangs, and so on and so forth. Finally, take advantage of things that might make construction easier. See a large hill? Maybe you want to hollow it out and use the pre-existing walls instead of having to put up your own. Is there an island surrounded by water? Build a base there to utilize the natural barrier for a more effective defense. Before we talk about defending your home, let's talk about how to plan it out in the first place. In general, I recommend that you follow the principle of modularity. Now, what do I mean by this? Essentially, instead of building a massive base all at once, you should build smaller chunks or modular units that can be easily connected to form a larger structure. This is more efficient in my view, as it lets you split up a massive project into smaller and thus more manageable portions, makes future expansions to accommodate progression much easier, and ensures that you will always have a fortified location to fall back to in case a horde of mobs overwhelms your offensive capabilities. The way to incorporate modularity into your designs is completely up to you, but personally, I like to create a network of small areas which I then connect with doors. If you watch my Hardcore Rebirth series, you'll know that my base consists of a few connected rings which I built over quite a long time. Additionally, keep in mind where you want to put your workstations and other accommodations. I like to group my areas by function, for example magic, better with mods, storage, ore processing, automation, livestock, and so on and so forth, with my storage area generally occupying the middle of my base so that I can easily access raw materials for any reason. Expanding your base and properly defending it is quite tedious, so try to lower your space footprint as much as possible. Now that you've picked a good location and planned out how your base is going to look on the inside, it's time to actually put up the defenses. There are three main components that make a wall good: strength, repairability, and accessibility. Strength is the most obvious factor, but what exactly makes a wall strong is not necessarily intuitive from the get-go. In this pack, the three main sources of block damage are explosive, fire, and mining mobs. Thus, you will need to pick out a material that is blast resistant, fireproof, and tough to mine. Generally, I recommend that you use stone bricks, since these fit all of the criteria I just mentioned. On the screen, you'll see a chart with the relative hardness of each stone brick type. Bricks with a mining time of 5.5 seconds or above are immune to normal creeper explosions, and bricks with a mining time of 7 seconds or above are immune to all explosions, including TNT, charged creepers, gas fireballs, and end crystals. All of these stones can be found in the overworld, with the exception of black granite, which is exclusive to the Beneath in Beta 5. The next component is repairability. In order for a wall to be effective, it must also be easily fixed when some damage is inevitably dealt to it. Thus, I encourage you to follow this progression of materials. In the very early game, use whatever you can find near you. It doesn't have to be perfect. Alternatively, you can use this cheap trick to get tons of easy stone bricks right off the bat without any smelting needed. In the early game, you want to use local stones to make bricks and then build the wall out of those bricks. Again, it doesn't really matter what the stones are. What matters is that you have the stone bricks up and running in the first place. In the mid game, you want to set up an automatic stone generator, see my tutorial in the top right corner, and use vanilla stone blocks to expand your base. In the late game, you want to start quarrying large amounts of either red granite or black granite and use that to fortify the outermost layers of your defense. And finally, if you're in the ultra late game and you literally have nothing better to do, then you can use obsidian to build your walls. Finally, a wall needs to be accessible to you and your teammates while being a massive obstacle for your enemies. Accessibility for yourself means that you should have an easy way to get on top of the wall, areas where you can fire arrows at invaders from behind cover, as well as any other potential utilities you may want. Inaccessibility for your enemies means that the outside of your wall should be hard to scale, particularly for spiders. So this would mean things like putting an overhang a few blocks out from your wall so they can't get up, or making the texture of the outside portion rough. Walls are great, but without additional defenses, they won't really do much. This is where traps come in. While I won't go over every single possible trap, I will talk about the three main classes you should incorporate into your designs: deterrents, damagers, and moats. Deterrents are traps which are designed to push enemies away from your base. Blocks which fall into this category include fans, water curtains, elevators, and more. It might seem counterintuitive to simply force mobs back instead of just killing them, but it may actually be very helpful, as not killing all the mobs means that the local mob cap will be constantly maxed out, and thus more challenging mobs such as plague beasts will simply be unable to spawn. Additionally, these traps tend to be both cheaper and easier to set up, so making them earlier on is doable. Damagers are traps which are designed to kill enemies that get too close. Blocks which fall into this category include flamers, razor wire, caltrops, and more. These traps are the ones you usually want to put on the outermost layers of your base defense, as it helps you to kill mobs quickly before they can get too close to your actual living quarters, so they have a lower chance of breaching the walls. While these defenses tend to be a little bit more expensive to have and maintain, they also tend to be more efficient than deterrents at protecting your base. Finally, you want to build moats around your base once you get decently progressed into the game. This is because moats are single-handedly the most effective defense in the game without really any competition. Usually people will build lava moats, but of course if you want to, you can also go with a water moat. You can design the moat however you'd like, but in general I recommend that you make at least a 4-block wide moat, because this will ensure that mobs not only can't jump over the gap, they also won't be able to pathfind to you by building over a bridge. Also, you want to try to utilize things such as trapdoors to mess with mob AI. Alternatively, if you want to recreate Vietnam, you can use these leaf traps, but do be careful because they will burn up if they're too close to lava. With Rebirth 3.0 Beta 5 comes Onslaught, the new mod which handles invasions in Rebirth. Mobs will spawn under very specific conditions, so we will be taking a look at how invasions are handled in order to mob-proof bases and ensure effective defenses. I may make an entire separate video on this mod, but let's just focus on the basics for now. The most important thing to understand is that mobs will be spawned as close to your location as possible. You want to light up absolutely everything in your base. If any location has a light level of 7 or lower, invasion mobs will spawn there. Next, mobs have a massive vertical range to their spawns. Thus, While they will try to spawn as close to you as possible, some of them will spawn in caves underneath your base. Make sure you either lit up all the caves near your base or that you have easy access to the cave systems so that you can wipe out the mobs when they spawn. If there are no good places for spawning, they will force spawn on any available space. Minimum light levels will be ignored, minimum distances too, and the range for spawns will be even greater, especially vertically. As a result, I highly encourage you to not light up too much of the area around your base in order to force them to spawn there instead of wherever the game feels like putting them. I strongly encourage you to make a separate area away from your base just for invasions. Apart from all that though, invasions are pretty straightforward. Kill the mobs, wait for the waves to spawn, and complete the invasion. Now that we've talked about the basic elements of a good base, let's look at some examples of solid bases on my Rebirth of the Night SMP. Here is an example of a really good farm design. So you can tell that this person is clearly an early game, but they have walls kind of surrounding their farm so that no mobs can get in. The walls themselves are made out of cobblestone, so again, much harder to break. And for mobs that don't have pickaxes, unbreakable entirely. And their house is also constructed mostly out of stone materials. Of course, there is a little bit of wood since they are pretty early on and it doesn't make sense to go quarrying too much. But overall, you can kind of see that this is a good example of an early game style defense for your food sources, which are going to be vital if you want to have any chance of surviving in the early stages. The next base that we're going to take a look at is the base built by Nova Siri and Patch Dragon on the SMP. So this base is very interesting. You can see right away that it has the main feature of any good base, and that is of course a massive stone brick wall. Interestingly, they did not choose to do a moat, although I would guess that's probably because of the sheer size of the compound. Such a large project would probably take quite a while, but you can immediately notice that there is an obsidian wall in between the stone brick layer. This makes sure that even if mobs are able to break through the first layer of the stone brick, which they probably are pretty easily able to do, it's going to be a lot harder to break through this obsidian. And you can see that all of the base is very, very, very well lit up. These are blue glow shrooms, or I think teal glow shrooms, which of course emit a light level of around, I think the same as a torch, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, this entire compound, very well lit up. The surrounding area is also pretty well lit up, but you'll see that the lighting up kind of abruptly stops, I'd say a good 20-30 blocks out from the main wall. That's because, like I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that invasion mobs can spawn without obstruction so that they don't spawn inside of your base. Inside, if we take a look, we have a wonderfully massive kind of farm here. These crystals are actually growth crystals from Nyx, which help to speed up crop growth nearby. We have greenhouse glass, just an absolutely enormous amount, which makes sure that the crops can grow in any season. And of course, the structure of the greenhouse itself is fortified with some very strong gneiss and gabbro bricks so that even if mobs get in, it's going to be pretty challenging to break. And nailed boards ensure that you need a pickaxe to break them, and beyond that, they also tend to burn a little bit longer than regular planks, so much harder to grief. But of course, that's not all. You have a central kind of storage tower over here, which you can access, I think, quite easily. Let's see. Yeah, you can access very easily from here, but you'll notice if you look at the location of the silo, that it's kind of like in the center of where most of the stuff in the base is, right? Like, sure, this greenhouse does take up a large portion, but if you look at the general kind of surrounding area where all the machines and the crafting stations are, this storage area is kind of smack dab in the middle. So perfect, great, easy access for whatever you need. But of course, that's not all. There's more. The underground area is really where I think the functionality of the base shines, and that is protected by, well, more stone bricks in the walls. You can kind of see what I'm saying here, right? The heavy usage of stone bricks ensures that these areas are very, very difficult to grief, and the fact that it's underground ensures that it's insulated from most mob attacks, especially the flying mobs like Vespas. And finally, this is not really part of the base, I would say, but something I do want to point out as well. is the lighting up of the caves underneath the base, so onslaught mobs can't spawn down here. Of course, that was a wonderful base, but if you're a little less creatively inclined, like I am, here's an example of a base of 2 players who made it all the way to the end game. So you can see that these guys have, diamond dragons of both types, full dragon steel, the whole shebang, right? Immediately, what you'll notice is that this was built on an ocean island. So if I fly out, kind of just to load up some of the chunks. Oh, I didn't even notice that there was just a massive ice dragon just vibing out over here. But you'll see that this is kind of built on a pretty large ocean area. So the water itself offers a huge amount of protection from most mobs. So right away, you're going to notice that there are very few things that the players here have to deal with. So this is a very simple base design, right? You kind of have like a more boxy shape. And because it's surrounded by ocean, the players here decided not to use stone brick walls. I mean, makes sense, right? It's kind of redundant. Of course, you have your standard stuff, like this greenhouse, which has a bunch of crops planted in it, with torches to make sure that the minimum light level requirements are met. You have a simple but effective box structure with a storage area kind of in the center, right? You'll notice that if you look around, that storage area is very close to the entrance of the base, I believe, which is right here, yep. But also is close enough to all the other machines, like these crafting areas, that it makes access very easy. And if you go upstairs, you'll notice that there is a portal here, which actually leads to a small balcony area, which is a nice addition, I feel like. And these guys kind of decided to vertically stack their machines in such a way that the water wheel here is running on the side of the base, which then powers upwards into these bellows. And I think this is actually missing a bellow, probably because of a mob or something. But yeah, you'll see that this is a very, very compact design, very nice. And I don't know if there's actually anything. Yeah, there's not really anything underground. But again, there is kind of this like ladder that leads all the way down to beneath for easy access. And these guys are also fortunate enough to not really have that many cave areas underneath them. I mean, there's this cave area, but I don't believe mobs can actually spawn down here for onslaught. So that's not too much of an issue. And again, you'll notice that they lit up the kind of immediate area around their base, but they did not actually light up all of the area around their base. And I remember actually coming here, I believe a few weeks ago when they were, still very active. They had glowstone, I believe. Yeah, like you can kind of see remnants of it, right? They had glowstone running kind of across the ocean here to the mainland. And they decided to get rid of that because they noticed that the invasion mobs would spawn wherever they felt like if there was no other place for them to spawn. So yeah, overall, a very simple design. I think it's very simple, but that doesn't detract from the fact that it is a very, very powerful design that has lasted them all the way until endgame. Alright, well, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them down in the comment section below. Leave a like if you liked the video, leave a dislike if you hated it. Subscribe for more content like this, and as always, I will catch you guys in the next video. Have a good one.